Today is Lee Seong's birthday, and as usual, I wasn't invited. Before leaving the house this morning, I asked Ju, "What time will you be home tonight?" He hesitated for a moment, then suddenly snapped, "Dao Dao. What's the point of asking that? Haven't you gotten used to Lee Seong by now? He didn't invite you, so there's no need to take it out on me." I forced a bitter smile. "I was just asking when you'd be home. You're my husband, am I not allowed to ask that?" He paused briefly, then said, "We'll see." I didn't let it go. I tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Is Jishu going too?" Juja shot me a cold glance. "She's not who you think she is. Stop asking about her." And with that, he slammed the door and left. I stared at the shoes he had kicked around, tears welling up in my eyes. Lee Seong was Juja's best friend. They had known each other since high school. He was funny, successful, almost perfect, except for the fact that he didn't like me. Once, when no one else was around, he cruelly told me, "The only reason you're with him is that you look a bit like Jishu. That's your only luck." That was the first time I heard about her. Scrolling through Lee Seong's timeline, I saw where they were, out of town. They had gone to the beach, feasted on seafood, hit the bars, then went to karaoke. In every photo, Jishu was there, radiant in a wine-red dress. And always, by Jishu's side, was Juja. I was so engrossed in the timeline that I didn't notice when an electric scooter hit me. Pain radiated through my body before I could even register what had happened. In a daze, all I felt was a sharp pain in my abdomen, and blood, so much blood, running down my legs. At the hospital, the doctor looked at me, stern and regretful. "I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but we couldn't save the baby." I stared at him, confused. "Baby?" He blinked, stunned. "You didn't know? You were 5 weeks pregnant." I placed my hand on my stomach, tears falling uncontrollably, my lips trembling. "I didn't know. I didn't know. How could I? How could I have a baby? My baby?" The doctor adjusted his glasses, avoiding my gaze. "You should notify your family. You'll need someone to care for you." Gritting my teeth through the pain, I called Juja. It was past midnight by then, so they were probably back at the hotel. Beep, beep, beep. 5 weeks. How did I not notice anything? Was it a boy or a girl? Would my child blame me? I'm so useless. Beep, beep, beep. Juja, please pick up. Our baby is gone. We're sorry. The number you are trying to reach is not available. Please try again later. I stayed awake all night, staring at my phone, only to receive a photo from Lee Seong. In the picture, Juja was holding Jishu, his face full of concern. Lee Seong messaged, "I told you. What's not yours will eventually have to be returned." I clutched my stomach, numb, and texted Juja, "Let's get a divorce." 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. When I got home, Juja still wasn't back. I looked around at the cold, empty house and let out a bitter laugh. So this was my marriage. I boiled water and opened a pack of snail noodles from the supermarket. Juja hated strong-smelling foods, so I had never cooked snail noodles at home. Even when I ate it outside, I'd rush to brush my teeth afterward, afraid that he'd notice. After brushing my teeth, I'd prepare dinner, trying to eat with him, pretending I hadn't already eaten. The pungent smell of snail noodles filled the kitchen and spilled into the living room. I sat on the carpet in the living room, slurping noodles. After a couple of bites, the door opened. Before he appeared, his voice filled the air with annoyance. "What are you eating? Didn't I tell you I can't stand that smell?" Juja stormed over, glaring down at me. I ignored him and continued eating. "Dao Dao, I'm talking to you." I swallowed slowly and looked up at him. "How does it feel to be ignored?" Juja blinked, momentarily confused. "What?" I said. "Did you read my message? I don't know how busy you've been. Too busy to respond to your wife's divorce text." Juja panicked. He had been so caught up with Jishu over the past few days that he hadn't checked his phone. He opened it now, dozens of missed calls, all from Dao Dao. Then he saw the WeChat message, "Let's get a divorce." Before he could think, his habit of blaming others kicked in. "I know Lee Seong didn't invite you to his birthday party. You're upset. But hasn't this happened every year? Why is this time any different? Just because of Jishu? Dao Dao. I didn't expect you to be so petty. I laughed bitterly. Yes. I should be more generous. I should understand. And applaud you for holding Jishu. And when you two get married, I should congratulate you. Right. Juja's face went pale. And he shouted. What are you talking about? He kicked the coffee table hard. His long legs, well trained from working out, shattered the glass surface. And the snail noodles I had just made spilled all over the floor. Startled, I jumped up, rubbing the skin burned by the hot broth, glaring at him with hatred. You're the one who's crazy. Juja's lips trembled. He glanced at my reddened arm, reaching out, but his phone rang. It was a different ringtone. He quickly picked up. Hey, Xiaoshu. Stomach pain. It must have been the seafood Li Xiong bought. Don't worry, I'll be right there. He hung up and shot me a look. Clean up this mess yourself. Then he turned and walked out the door. I watched as Juja hurried out, the smell of snail noodles cooling around me. And once again, tears fell from my eyes. Juja and I had known each other since we were children. I was a year younger than him. When we were little, I almost drowned, but he saved me. Since then, I followed him everywhere, right up until he graduated from middle school, and his family moved to another city. I thought that would be the end of whatever we had. After all, for years, he'd always said to me, Dao Dao, I only see you as a little sister. I never expected that when I went to college, it would be in the same city as him. Our universities were separated by just a bridge. When I filled out my college applications, I hadn't contacted him at all. It felt like fate was bringing us back together. He had changed so much, taller, more handsome, more mature. I couldn't help but fall in love with him. I don't know if Juja felt the same way, but when we reunited, his attitude toward me was noticeably different. He would often stare at me for a long time, and when I caught him, he'd blush, turn away, and mutter, I wasn't looking at you. I'd blush too and quietly tease, there's no one else here. Every time I said that, he would fall silent. 2 years after we graduated, I got my wish. I married Juja. Back then, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. How many people get to marry the love of their life from childhood? But I had forgotten that we had been apart for 3 years. In those 3 years, Juja had met the person who had enchanted him during his youth. His white moonlight. Jishu. Li Xiong had once told me I looked like Jishu, but I didn't believe him. That is, until a month ago, when Jishu suddenly appeared before me. Only then did I realize how true it was. There really were a few similarities between us. Except Jishu was radiant, while I was just plain in comparison. When she smiled at me and playfully teased Juja, this type really suits you. His eyes immediately darkened. From that moment on, my life completely changed. Jishu always had a reason to contact Juja, to prevent me from misunderstanding. She even added me on WeChat to explain things. And Juja, every time she called, whether we were in a video meeting, having dinner, showering, sleeping, or even making love, he'd immediately leave to be with her. I didn't understand. So I asked him why. He looked at me, displeased. Didn't Li Xiong already explain? Jishu's family business is struggling. Her mother jumped off a building, and she's been through a divorce. Dao Dao. She's having a tough time, and I can't just sit by and watch. Besides, I'm not the only one going. Li Xiong is always there too. Why can't you be more understanding? Why can't you sympathize with me? With that, I knew pressing further would only make me seem unreasonable, unsympathetic. I thought all this would end eventually, but reality proved how naive I was. That night, Jishu posted something on social media. Nothing like an old classmate to lift your spirits. Tilda in the photo. Juja was pouring her water, his deep eyes filled with undisguised worry and tender helplessness. I held my cup of coffee and stared at Jishu, who sat across from me. It wasn't enough for her to flaunt it on social media, she had to confront me in person too. Today, as soon as I arrived at work, Jishu messaged me, saying she wanted to meet and talk. I'm sorry for bothering you lately. I've been abroad for a few years, and I didn't realize how fast things had changed here. Coming back has been overwhelming. And the only familiar person I could turn to was Juja. I'm lucky he's still the same as he was in high school. Jishu was incredibly beautiful. Despite all she'd been through, it hadn't diminished her beauty. In fact, there were moments, like when she lowered her head to sip her coffee, when her vulnerability shone through, making others want to protect her, both radiant and in need of protection. But why did it have to be Juja? Suddenly, I felt a deep hatred toward him, and my words turned sharp. Too bad. He's changed a bit, like marrying me. For the first time. Jishu's perfect face cracked slightly. She tucked her hair behind her ear and calmly said, "He and I share some resemblance. Didn't he ever tell you?" I clenched my teeth. That just proves he's a coward. If he truly loved you, he would have waited for you. If he didn't marry, you two could be together openly now, instead of making you the other woman. Jishu abruptly stood up, glaring at me with fury. After a moment, she seemed to regain her composure, straightened, and tucked her hair behind her ear again. He was always mine. You never had his heart. So how could I be the other woman? After she left, I felt hollow. I went home, had a quick bite to eat, and sat numbly on the sofa. When Juja walked in, he saw me sitting on the couch, doing nothing, and glanced at the empty dining table. He rolled up his sleeves and asked, "Where's dinner?" I gave him a cold look. "Don't you have hands and feet? You need someone to feed you?" Juja snorted. "You can't even handle something as simple as that." "I'm tired. Can't I take a break?" "Tired? Yet you had time to make snail noodles at home but no time to cook dinner for me." I was so angry I laughed. "You recognize this as a home? It's your home. And it's my home too. I made snail noodles in my own home. Do I need your permission?" Juja realized he had misspoken, but he'd never admit he was wrong. "What's your problem?" I replied. "No problem. Have you thought about what I said?" I stared at him, still a little unwilling to let go. I hadn't done anything wrong. When we married, he had clearly promised in front of our family and friends to love me for life. Before Jishu returned, we were the couple everyone admired. If he would hesitate, if he'd just change a little, I could still. Juja asked, "What are you talking about?" I couldn't believe it. He looked at me, his face full of irritation. I let out a bitter laugh. What was I even hoping for? Divorce. What else would it be? Juja frowned. "What's gotten into you lately? Haven't we been fine?" I couldn't hold back anymore and shouted, "Fine? Where? What's fine about this? Fine enough that I can't feel it? Is something wrong with your head? Oh right. You must be really happy. You just can't stand it when others aren't as miserable as you." Juja was furious. "I've told you already. There's nothing going on between me and Jishu. Why can't you believe that? Every time I see her, I tell you. Why can't you understand? Are you really that cold?" I retorted. "Cold? Ha. Yes. I haven't learned your kindness, abandoning your family, leaving your wife, running off in the middle of the night to drink and talk with your white moonlight. I haven't learned from Jishu either, who seeks out her married ex-flame when she's sad. According to you, my husband constantly leaves me to go see another woman. So if my mood is bad, can I just find someone else for comfort too? Only you get to have a past. Right. Only your past is more noble than anyone else's. Right." Juja's face darkened. "What past do you have? From high school? Who? That guy with the glasses? Are you still in touch with him?" He was talking about the class president from my high school. After graduating from university, he also worked in this city. We had met a few times, but it was strictly a professional relationship. I laughed. "Don't think everyone is as despicable as you and Jishu. You think your feelings are more noble than others, but there are people far more dignified than you too." Juja was enraged. "What do you want?" I touched my stomach. "I just want a divorce." Without thinking, Juja immediately refused. No way. He didn't want to continue the conversation, walking toward the kitchen as he asked, "Have you eaten?" "I've eaten already. I don't need to wait for someone to cook for me." Juja turned back to look at me. "Are you going to stop this nonsense?" I got up and headed to the bathroom. "I'll stop when we get divorced. Don't make me repeat myself. It's not happening." After this argument, Juja started picking me up from work every day. He didn't ask me to cook anymore either, ordering expensive takeout instead. His gestures quickly made an impact, and my co-workers admired him. "Your husband is so wonderful." I didn't respond, because only I knew that every night, after I pretended to fall asleep, he'd sneak out of bed, stand barefoot on the balcony, and call Ji-shu. "She's asleep. Why do you care? She wasn't like this before. Maybe something triggered her. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Just take care of yourself. Of course I miss you. I'll find a way to see you soon." I'd had enough. I filed for divorce, forcing Ju to sign the papers. He glared at me, exasperated. "What more do you want from me? I've been coming home on time every day, bringing my work home, and I'm not seeing Ji-shu anymore, even when her pipes burst. It was Lee Seong who went to fix them. What more do you want?" I said. "If you want to fix her pipes, go ahead. I'm not stopping you." Juja's face flushed red, then turned pale. Finally, it turned an ugly shade of green. "Stop being unreasonable. I didn't marry you to argue about this every day. You used to be gentle and understanding. What's changed?" I was about to say something else when his phone rang again. "Lee Seong. What's up?" Juja asked impatiently. A moment later, his face went ashen, and his voice trembled. "Ji-shu tried to kill herself. What happened? What hospital are you at? I'm coming right away." He didn't even glance at me before running out the door. The gust of wind he created as he rushed out sent my divorce papers fluttering through the air, landing softly on the floor. I picked them up, my tears soaking through the paper. That night, Ji-shu sent me a picture. In it, Juja, unshaven and disheveled, was asleep beside her hospital bed. Looks like he still loves me. Since then, Juja hadn't returned home, and I'd finally lost all hope. That day, after finishing work, I felt a dull ache in my stomach. So I asked my supervisor if I could leave early. Seeing my pale face, she urged, "You should see a doctor. Don't neglect your health." I took a taxi to the hospital alone. After the checkup, the doctor told me there was nothing serious, just that I needed to rest. As I lowered my head and walked out with the results in hand, a familiar voice sounded above me. "You really came here. Did you have to take it this far?" I looked up to see Juja, his face haggard. He stared at me with bloodshot eyes, as if I were his enemy. I was still in a daze. "What are you talking about?" Juja pointed behind me. "Didn't you know Ji-shu was in this hospital? You came here to confront her, didn't you?" "Dao Dao." She slit her wrists so deep you could see bone. "Can you just leave her alone?" It was ridiculous. Juja actually wanted me to leave Ji-shu alone. I mumbled. "I came here for something unrelated to her, believe it or not." Before I could finish, someone snatched the medical report from my hands. Out of nowhere, Lee Seong appeared, with Ji-shu beside him. I immediately panicked. Lee Seong, holding my report, gave me a disdainful look. "What's this? Trying to play the victim? Give it back." I lunged forward, desperate to take back the report. They couldn't know. They mustn't find out. Lee Seong, tall and imposing, raised the report high above my head. As he opened it, he said, "Let's see what's wrong with you." "Accident. Miscarriage." He paused, surprised, and glanced at me, then back at the report, repeating, "You had a miscarriage." For a moment, no one said a word. All that could be heard was the murmur of other patients and their families in the hallway. It took a long time before Juja reacted. He snatched the report from Lee Seong, staring at the word miscarriage written on it. He looked at it again and again, then grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to meet his eyes. "What happened? Why did you miscarry? When were you pregnant? How could you not tell me something so important?" I looked at his worried face and started laughing. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. "How could I not tell you? The night you took Ji-shu to Lee Seong's birthday party, didn't I call you? Did you pick up? How was I supposed to tell you? Was I supposed to crawl to you and say it?" Juja's face turned deathly pale, and he staggered back. Ji-shu suddenly spoke up. "Juja, I feel nauseous." Without turning around, Juja said to Lee Seong, "Take her home." Ji-shu tried to say something, but Lee Seong urged her. "Come on. Let's go. We'll talk later. She shot me a resentful look before leaving with him. Then Juja took me home. I sat on the couch, and he looked at me, as if he had a lot to say but didn't know how to start. Finally, he just asked, "Are you hungry? Do you want to eat something? Snail noodles? Maybe. No, wait. We don't have any. I'll cook something else for you." As I watched him clumsily try to help, a bitter feeling rose in my chest. It was almost funny. Why didn't he do this earlier? Now he was pretending to be the perfect husband. Juja awkwardly brought over a bowl of plain porridge. He had never cooked before, and there was too much water, so it looked more like soup than porridge. He looked at me sheepishly. "I'll cook better next time." The steam from the porridge blurred my vision. "Don't cry anymore. Dao Dao. We'll have children in the future." Juja sat down beside me, pulling me into his arms. I cried until my voice was hoarse, until the porridge went cold, and the steam disappeared. Juja handed me a tissue, his eyes filled with guilt. I wiped my tears, and after pouring out all the bitterness in my heart, I felt a little lighter. Calmly, I said, "Juja, let's get divorced." His eyes widened in shock, and he abruptly stood up. "Why?" Just as he asked, his phone rang again. It was the ringtone he had set for Jishu. His expression changed, and he immediately silenced the ringtone. I felt exhausted. Does it even matter anymore? Jishu clings to you every moment. And my child and I can't stay with you. Maybe she knew she'd have to live like this and that's why she left you. Juja, panicked, dropped to his knees, clinging to my legs. "Please, Dao Dao. Haven't you loved me the most? Didn't you love me since elementary school? Why are you trying to leave me?" I couldn't understand why he was saying this. "Do you even know what you're talking about? You know I love you. Yet you still treated me this way. Do you love me?" Juja was stunned, hesitating. "Of course I admit I don't love you as deeply as you love me, but we had a child. We had a child together." I responded quietly, "But the child is gone now. No matter how much you pretend, it's not coming back." Juja screamed. "What pretending? That was my child. What kind of man do you think I am?" Looking into his furious eyes, I finally understood. Juja had once lived a privileged life, but due to his father's poor management, their family almost went bankrupt. Jishu, his white moonlight, left him to marry someone else abroad. And now, even I wanted to divorce him. He had always lived in fear of losing everything. As for the child, no matter what happens between us, blood ties remain. Even if we break up, a child would still call him father. So he wasn't trying to hold on for me or for our relationship, it was for his own sake. I moved into the small apartment my parents had bought me before I got married. I called my mother and told her I wanted a divorce. At first, she disagreed. I said, "He doesn't love me anymore. Mom, you love me, don't you? Would you really want to see me get hurt?" She was silent for a while, then agreed and told me that she and Dad would be there if I needed help. Juja refused to accept the divorce and kept calling and texting me. I blocked his number without hesitation. One day, after work, Lee Seong came to see me again. He looked at me, visibly awkward. "How are you doing?" he asked. I didn't know why he was there and replied coldly. "The doctor said I need to rest." Before he could say anything else, I asked, "How can I get a divorce from Juja?" Lee Seong was surprised. "You had a miscarriage because of him, and you still want a divorce? Didn't you love him?" I found it odd. "Didn't you think I wasn't good enough for him? That I got lucky? Now that Jishu is back, I'm letting go. Shouldn't you be happy?" Lee Seong said nothing. I continued, "Stop wasting your time. You were right, we aren't a good match. Now, can you help me convince him to sign the divorce papers? I don't want to keep living like this. And you don't want Jishu to stay the third party forever, do you?" Lee Seong hesitated for a moment before trying to persuade me. "Think it over. It doesn't have to end like this between you and Juja. Are you crazy?" I scoffed. No matter what I did before, they always saw me as a hanger-on. Now that I'd lost my child, they thought I should stay with him. Despite all the pain I'd gone through, they saw my suffering as proof of my love for Juja. Did I really need to pay such a high price to prove my love? After sending Lee Seong away, I went to my workplace and submitted my resignation. My boss looked at me, surprised. "Is something wrong?" she asked. I had taken this job to be able to take care of Juja. The working hours were easy, 9 to 5 with weekends off, and there was no pressure. Because of that, Juja often commented that my job didn't require much thinking. Looking back, I realized I had sacrificed so much for him. I just suddenly feel like I need to do something for myself, I answered. My boss saw the determination in my eyes and didn't say anything more. Accepting my resignation, I left the company feeling a sense of relief and took a taxi to Juja's house to pack up my things. The day I moved back to my apartment, I had only taken a few clothes in a rush. This time, I wanted to take everything. When I arrived at Juja's house, he still hadn't changed the password. I opened the door. The house was exactly the same. No sign of anyone having lived there. I pulled out my suitcase and started packing. I didn't have much to take because every time I bought something I liked, Juja would frown. I understood immediately that he didn't like it, so I would sell it online or give it to friends. Eventually, I lost the desire to buy anything for myself. Since I didn't have much, packing was easy. As I dragged my suitcase into the living room, I saw Juja sitting on the couch. He looked surprised, then happy, and cautiously approached me. "You're back?" he asked, almost pleadingly. I looked at him, feeling nothing. "Sorry, I'm just here to get my things. I don't mean to bother you." But Juja didn't seem to hear me. "The house is a bit dirty. I've been staying at the office. I'll clean up later. And I've stopped seeing Jishu. I told Lee Seong to take care of her. Don't worry. From now on, I'll take care of you." I was surprised he could say that. "Did he agree?" I asked. Juja nodded. He agreed. "Don't you miss Jishu?" I asked. Juja said nothing. I immediately thought of something. "Are you waiting for me to get better so you can go back to Jishu?" Juja denied it. "No, I didn't believe him. You want the best of both worlds, don't you?" "What do you think I am?" Juja sighed helplessly. "You weren't like this before. You were always kind, understanding, and supportive." "That's because I liked you," I replied. "If I had known my understanding would lead you to Jishu's bed, I would never have married you." Juja looked horrified, his lips trembling. He could only say, "No way. I won't give up. If we have another child, we can keep going." I didn't want to say anything more and pulled my suitcase out the door. Just as I left the apartment complex, I ran into Jishu. She no longer looked radiant. Instead, she seemed worn out, with a hint of madness in her eyes. She glanced behind me, knowing I had just come from Juja's place. "I need to talk to you." I didn't want to get involved with her any further and said, "Say it here. I have things to do." Jishu bit her lip. "When are you going to divorce Juja? Why are you still clinging to him? Going to his place to seduce him?" I laughed. "Are you sick? Even if I don't love Juja anymore, we're still married. How does that make me the one seducing him? If you're not trying to seduce him, why won't he divorce you?" she shouted. I looked at her, suddenly feeling pity. She was so beautiful, had lived abroad, and though her family had fallen on hard times, she wasn't destitute. She could have built her own value, but instead, she clung to married men to prove her appeal. How much could these married men really love her? I was exhausted and just wanted to resolve this quickly. "You should push Juja. I gave him the divorce papers a while ago." Jishu didn't believe me. "Are you saying Juja doesn't want to divorce?" I answered. "Do you think I have the energy to lie to you? Seeing you two disgusts me." Still, Jishu wouldn't let go. "I know you had a miscarriage. Are you playing the victim now? Pretending to withdraw so you can get closer? Do you think Juja will stay with you out of pity?" She dared to mention my child. I slapped her, coldly saying, "You have no right to mention my child. And I'm not like you, crying and making a scene over a scratch. If you've got the guts, make Juja divorce me. If not, shut your mouth." She held her face, speechless. I left immediately. After a few days of rest, I started my new job. I had always loved drawing since I was young. I majored in oil painting at university, but after graduation, my life revolved around Juja, and painting fell by the wayside. Fortunately, my best friend was a comic editor. After I briefly explained what had happened recently, she cursed Juja and said, "Don't worry about that terrible man. There are better ones out there. Only money is real. Remember back in high school, everyone passed around your comics, calling you the little artist? You can do this. I believe in you." I smiled and replied, "Yes." As a child, I loved reading comics and letting my imagination run wild, especially imagining the love stories between princes and princesses. If not for that, I probably wouldn't have given my heart to Juja. Shaking my head, I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on work. That day, after sending my latest comic draft to my friend, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, I saw Lee Seong standing there, arms full of bags, as if he was moving in. I didn't let him in. "What's going on?" I asked. Lee Seong smiled. "I know you're busy, so I bought you some things, food, supplies, even toys." He glanced inside. "Can I come in for a bit?" I scoffed. "Give me a break, Lee Seong. We're not that close." He quickly replied, "All right." Looking at his obsequious manner, I wanted to laugh. "The things you said to me over the years, you've probably forgotten, but I remember them all. What's this act you're putting on now? Who's it for?" Lee Seong's face flushed red, then turned pale, but I wasn't about to let him off. "Juja says you've been taking care of Jishu. Now you're buying things for me. Must be exhausting, right?" His expression changed, and he shook his head furiously. "No, not at all. And Jishu's not a child. I don't go to her place much." I snorted. Sweat began to form on his forehead. Realizing I had no intention of letting him in, Lee Seong blurted out, "Weren't you the one who always clung to Juja? Why the sudden change? Aren't you afraid Jishu will steal him from you?" I laughed. "That's exactly what I want." With that, I slammed the door in his face. Ignoring his surprise, my best friend said the storyline of my comic was excellent, and her company wanted to sign a contract with me. I agreed immediately. After signing the contract, she posted my comic on a platform and used every resource to promote it for me. Before long, my comic became a sensation online. The positive feedback from readers gave me a huge boost of confidence. I threw myself into my work, day and night. One day, after posting the latest chapter, I opened Weibo to check the readers' reactions, but I noticed my account had suddenly gained a huge spike in followers. My private messages were flooded, and the number of comments on my latest post had multiplied several times. This account was new, created solely for work purposes, and the engagement had always been average. What caused this sudden surge? I opened the comment section. So cute. The CEO himself promoting his wife's comic. OMG. They're such a perfect couple. The romantic love story between a rising comic artist and a CEO. I'm all in for this. The CEO wrote in the post, "I love my wife, it's so sweet it's making me jealous." My face darkened as I quickly opened the list of people who had shared my post. And at the very top of that list was Juja, my beloved wife's comic. "Please support her." Just that one simple sentence drew countless onlookers. I clicked on his Weibo profile and saw that he had even pinned the post to the top of his page. His Weibo was rarely updated, with only a few posts related to his company. My post stood out awkwardly amidst it all. I had no idea how he had figured out that this account was mine, and before I could think of how to deal with the situation, Jishu sent me a WeChat message. When I opened it, there was a photo of her and Juja in bed. He was fast asleep, clearly comfortable, and next to him, Jishu lay there, her round chest on full display. "Don't get too full of yourself. Juja was with me last night." I smiled, saved the photo, and replied, "Thanks." I didn't respond to Juja's Weibo post for the rest of the day. The online community was buzzing with curiosity. People kept leaving comments under my Weibo post. Juja's love even trended on the top search lists. I stayed silent until midnight. Then, I asked my best friend to contact 800 marketing accounts to take coordinated action. Almost immediately, the keywords Juja's affair, Juja's white moonlight, and Juja's Jishu shot to the top 3 trending searches. Right at the center of it all was the photo Jishu had sent me of them in bed. Since Ji Shu often shared pictures on Weibo, netizens quickly tracked her down. As the chaos swirled online, I temporarily logged in, liked a post about Zhuzhe's infidelity, then quickly unliked it and logged out. By the time Zhuzhe's company's PR team reacted, spending large sums to remove the trending searches and wipe the rumors from the internet, his past with Ji Shu had already been thoroughly exposed. The next morning, Zhuzhe showed up at my door, unshaven and disheveled. I sat on the sofa, arms crossed, calmly watching him. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, lips cracked, and his clothes wrinkled. He looked like someone who hadn't slept all night. Cheerfully, I asked, "Just rolled out of Ji Shu's bed?" He clenched his fists, his lips tightly sealed, unable to say a word. I gestured toward the divorce papers on the table. "Sign it. Keep making trouble, and your company's public offering will go up in smoke." The company was his lifeblood. He picked up the pen, glanced up at me, and asked with a tone of defeat, "Is there really no chance for us anymore?" I gave a slight, mocking smile but didn't answer. He stared at me, searching for any sign of hesitation in my eyes. When he found none, he lowered his head and signed his name. When he looked up again, tears were streaming down his face. "Dao Dao, I know you won't believe me now, but that photo, I swear, it wasn't intentional." She drugged my drink. She said she would give me a child. "I thought it was you talking to me, and I got so excited. I never expected it to turn out like this." I responded calmly, "If she wants to give you a child, isn't that great? Your white moonlight giving you a baby. What's there to be sad about?" Zhuzhe stared blankly at me, his mouth moving slightly, his voice barely a whisper. "I only wanted our child. After Zhuzhe and I finalized our divorce, Ji Shu immediately moved into his house. I, on the other hand, found peace and threw myself into my work. Despite being tied down by family obligations over the years, I had never neglected my artistic practice. Plus, my best friend's advice was invaluable. My comic series became increasingly popular, and my readership continued to grow. However, Ji Shu's life wasn't as she had imagined. She and Zhuzhe registered their marriage, but they didn't have a wedding ceremony, perhaps to show that she was living well. She posted pictures of designer handbags, dresses, and jewelry on social media every day. But one night, she posted a cryptic status, "Why does everything keep changing?" Although she quickly deleted it, it was like a spark that ignited more posts. She followed it up with a few more lines, with shorter intervals between each. "I will never cook. Why bother making hangover soup? Why drink if you need a cure? What's the point of drinking at all? What does it matter what time I go to bed? Why do you even care if I go to karaoke? Why is everything different from what I imagined?" Zhuzhe had grown accustomed to me taking care of everything for him, and Ji Shu was the woman he had admired for years. When they first moved in together, he must have been happy, but living together was a different story. There were meals to cook, cleaning to do, groceries to buy, and Zhuzhe didn't like hiring help. Previously, I had handled everything seamlessly, and he had taken it for granted. He didn't actually know how to manage his own life. And Ji Shu, she had been spoiled her entire life, assuming she could live a glamorous life, enjoying Zhuzhe's affection, believing everyone would envy her. But unfortunately for her, Zhuzhe was no longer the lovesick teenager he once was. He now ran a company, had endured tough times, managed hundreds of employees, and had competitors watching his every move. As expected, within 6 months, Ji Shu was frequently traveling abroad, and another man often appeared in her pictures. But their lives no longer concerned me. My comic became a bestseller, topping the charts, and its popularity on major platforms continued to rise. During a book signing event, Lee Seong suddenly appeared in front of me. He didn't seem to be doing well. Zhuzhe and Ji Shu had both been imprisoned. Zhuzhe's company had collapsed, and Lee Seong's company, heavily tied to Zhuzhe's, had gone bankrupt as well. His wife had taken their child back to her parents' house and was planning to sue him for divorce. Lee Seong looked haggard and thin as he greeted me with a bitter smile. "Long time no see." I nodded. "Long time no see." He gave an awkward laugh. "I've read your comic. It's really good. Congratulations on your success." I replied calmly. I've just been lucky. There are many talented people in this industry, and I have to work hard to keep up. Lee Seong gaped at me. You seem so different now. I felt a slight tremor of emotion. That's because you never really understood me. He gazed into the distance. Have you visited Juja? He misses you a lot. Juja and I are no longer connected. Before Lee Seong could say more, a clear voice interrupted us. Ms. Dao. The car is here. Do you need anything else? A handsome young man jogged over to me. Lee Seong looked shocked at the way the young man's eyes followed me, but he didn't say anything more. I turned to the young man and smiled. Let's go. I owe you a big dinner. A new life. New opportunities. New everything. All awaited me. Who would ever want to look back at the past?